Hello, everyone. Welcome to Light on Yoga, Living the Practice. So this is a series from UK exploring the enduring influence of light on yoga by B.K.S. Iyengar. So over 60 years since its publication, this book continues to shape how yoga is practiced and taught around the world. And in this series, we're speaking with teachers to hear their personal stories. And today I'm joined by Sallie Sullivan, a highly experienced Iyengar yoga teacher. Sallie began practicing yoga in the early 70s, and alongside her teaching, Sallie has also explored Sanskrit and yoga philosophy. So in our conversation today, we are going to be exploring her reflections on light on yoga, its place in the wider history of yoga and text, and how it shaped her own journey and what it continues to offer today. So hello, Sallie. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. I'm starting our conversations with people just finding out a little bit about how you came to yoga and your first memories of doing Iyengar yoga.
Well, I started Iyengar Yoga when I was stuck at home with my first child and no longer able to rush off and get outside and do exercise whenever I felt like it. And suddenly yoga seemed like the thing I could do. I could practice in half an hour when the baby was napping. And I didn't have to organise babysitting to go out and do other activities. And I was lucky enough to by chance to land up in an Iyengar yoga night class, and just absolutely loved it from the very first class. It was just what I was looking for when I found it.
And had Light on Yoga been published at that point?
I don't know because I don't think I really distinguished between that and other sorts of yoga. For me, it was just yoga, and I didn't really have any grounding at all in the subject, and that came a bit later. So that was in '74. And it wasn't until the early 1980s that I started to take it seriously. And of course, Life on Yoga then was the only book available, and remained the only book for quite a long time.
And did you practice from the book as well as your classes?
Not really until I was persuaded to start being mentored, although we didn't call it that then, to become a teacher, and my teacher showed me a copy and said, "You really should get this." So I got it. And of course, like everybody, I loved the pictures most of all. I have to admit, I really, to begin with, just looked at the pictures and tried to copy them, and didn't read the introduction at all. And then gradually, once I was training to teach, I did look at the instructions, obviously. Um, And it was when I had to fill in the application form to apply for assessment to be a teacher that I found the question that said, "Have you read the introduction to Light on Yoga? Do you feel you understood it?" And so I had to read it. Um, I thought, well, I have to be honest in case they check. I had to say, no, really, I didn't understand it. It's very dense. There was so much in it, and it was so alien to anything I'd ever heard of before. So that's where I started.
And then when did you meet Mr. Iyengar? We've got some lovely photos to share for people who are watching and not on audio. So when did you first meet Mr. Iyengar?
Well, I was lucky enough actually to meet him in Oxfordshire when he came over in 1982, something like that. It was before I'd qualified as a teacher. I was still in being mentored, and I applied to attend a couple of courses that he was supervising. He didn't always teach. He sometimes taught by getting other people to teach the poses, our junior intermediate teachers, and then he'd unpick their teaching and do it so much better. Um, and the picture you've shown was a bit later. That was in the early 1990s when he came over for the wonderful convention at Crystal Palace, where I think there were 1,000 of us. There was a photo on the front page of the Times of the whole group in head balance with Mr. Iyengar at the front, all doing Shirshasana. But on that occasion, I'd been pulled up onto the stage for him to teach or reteach Parivrtta Ardhachandrasana, which of course isn't actually in Light on Yoga because he hadn't invented it then. Or perhaps they told him to leave it out because he had too much material, which I think was a problem with Light on Yoga, that it should have been twice as long if he'd had his way. But anyway, he just wanted somebody to point out things and spotted me, and I'd already taught at the convention, so he pulled me out to demonstrate on. So that's why I'm standing there listening to what he's saying to the whole group.
So you taught in front of him. How did that feel?
I enjoyed it, I must admit. I mean, it was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. And I was lucky I didn't get scolded too much. I did get corrected massively, of course, we all did. But how else was he going to check up on our teaching if he just came over and taught? Then we would just say how wonderful it was and try and copy what we'd heard. Whereas if we taught in front of him, he could unpick the errors in our understanding and cast a bit of light on what we were up to. It was a way for him to teach what needed to be taught and our misunderstandings.
Yes. Terrifying to teach in front of him, though. And then I've got another. Was this one in Pune?
That was later in Pune. That was when sticky mats had come in, because when I started, nobody had a sticky mat. We all slipped and slid, and we learned to work our feet and our legs properly, which I think was actually quite a boon. But I think that must have been was well into this century. And I took a mat as a gift because you always had to take a gift. That was given, you wanted to anyway. And so I took a brand new sticky mat, and they were a bit of a rarity. And I have to tell you, in the sports shop in Pune a year or two later, I noticed that sticky mats in India, if you translated the rupees into pounds, cost exactly the same in India as they did here. And when you think that a rickshaw ride would cost a few pennies, which in this country would have cost many pounds, gives you an idea of how expensive a sticky mat was then, and I think probably still is. So accumulating sticky mats for the Institute was quite a boon. That's why he's looking so chuffed.
Can you talk me through kind of what existed before Light on Yoga and how Light on Yoga was so different?
Well, the first thing to say, of course, is it's not the first book by an Indian yoga teacher which appeared in English and was published in the West. It's not the first. The first was actually the 10-Point Way to Health by the Raja of Aund, which was really just about Surya Namaskar, and that was published in the West. There may be others, but I haven't come across them. But the books that Mr. Iyengar references in the introduction to Light on Yoga are the Sanskrit texts by various teachers. And of course, the first mention, there are mentions in the Upanishads, not so much in the Vedas, which are older, but the Bhagavad Gita, the 6th chapter in particular, is about yoga, but it's about the whole discipline of yoga, not just asana. That's the thing, you have to distinguish between yoga postures, yogasana, and the whole subject of yoga culminating in ultimate liberation. So you've got the Bhagavad Gita, and then the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which mentions asana, but only in the commentary references 12 postures, which are all seated. And the presumption always was that it was different poses to prepare the body or to practice sitting for meditation. So they were not active asanas. And then you come on to the Shiva Samhita, which Mr. Iyengar mentions in the introduction, which is about 14th century, roughly. I mean, they didn't put dates on them, unfortunately, so it's a guess by the experts. But that only describes 4 asanas, all of which are seated. And then, and that, of course, is devoted to, it's supposed to be a conversation between Shiva and his consort about yoga. So the whole thing is devoted to the deity Shiva. and it's described as being something that's secret and not for everyone. And then the next one that Mr. Iyengar references is the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is 15th century roughly, and is always seen as the go-to text on Hatha Yoga, the yoga of force or the yoga of strength, which describes all sorts of very arcane practices for cleansing the body internally and outwardly, and which also gives a lot of the sort of yoga anatomy, as it were, very based on the theories about the systems of the body in Ayurveda, and again has a lot of very arcane practices which sound quite dangerous in the cleansing practices and in the breath control. I mean, saying that people should be able to hold the breath for 2 hours, I think, oh, that's perhaps not in this lifetime. And then he also references the Geranda Samhita, which is 18th century and is dedicated to the deity Vishnu. So by having the Shiva Samhita and then the Geranda Samhita, which is dedicated to Vishnu, he's sort of covered the two main bases, as it were, for the deities that are most espoused these days in modern Hindu belief systems.
Going back to Light on Yoga, when that was published, it had a lot more sequencing in it for students to be able to actually do the yoga asanas compared to the previous texts that were available.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, if we look at the Geranda Samhita, it's got 32 asanas. It's quite interesting that they they go from the three texts that I've mentioned go from 3 postures being described to I think about 15 are described in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and then 32 in the Geranda Samhita. But they're in random order. For example, Shavasana doesn't come at the end, and the poses are sort of mixed up. There's no obvious sequencing, no sort of start here and then move on to this, and then when you're really well toned, have a go at this. They're just named and described. Whereas, of course, you come to Light on Yoga, and it's not just this incredible reference library, as it were, of more than 200 asanas, but there's a sequence for learning which would spread over many years. So there's the sequences for practice, and then there's all the advice, the hints and the cautions, and then the medical section, the curative asanas, and of course the incredible pictures.
And actually, I've heard you also have a first edition.
I
The
do.
the
It's quite
photos.
dramatic. I mean, one of the things I love about the first edition is that the pictures are quite big and clear, but the problem with it is that the pictures are all gathered at the end of the book. And if you're working through a sequence of asanas, if you want to look at the picture, you have to read the instructions and then leaf through to the back end of the book to find the photo. And so later editions, the photographs were grouped with the instructions for the asanas. So I think that was the only alteration that was made when it was republished in the new format, to make it easier to use.
And I suppose the black and white pictures at the back all being together is really inspiring if you want to work through the sequence. So you probably need 2 copies next to each other, one with the instructions and the photo, and then the first editions where you've got all the pictures.
Yeah.
And how did Light on Yoga change like the access to yoga with the sequencing in it?
I think it was revolutionary. And I mean, some revolutions, people then build on the revolution and produce even better work. But I have not seen a yoga book that matches it for the depth of knowledge, the depth of understanding, the analytical approach and the aesthetic approach. It's just, it's a masterpiece.
What stands out about Light on Yoga and the way that it's organized?
I think probably most people, when they're learning, would approach it the way I did, that you start after the introduction, you start on the asanas and you work through that a lot. That was how I approached it. And then I started looking at the sequencing and puzzling over them, because sometimes you think, I wonder why that's switched place from week 14 to week 16. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. But I also did use the curatives. I must tell you, I used the cure section, for headache or tummy upset. And then one day I had a stinking head cold, and I thought, oh, I feel really rotten. I don't know what to do. So let's look up cold. So I found cold, and it was Shirshasana and all the variations, and then Savangasana and all the variations. The pose where you sit down and then you bend forward, the tortoise pose, and then yoga nidrasana, the one where you cross your arms behind your back and the feet over the top of your head, and you roll yourself up into a little ball, and then Paschimottanasana, and that was about it. I thought, oh my goodness me, that's so difficult. And I had a bit of a cough, so I tried the program for a cough, which was deep twists. And it wasn't until some time later that somebody explained to me that when it said cold, it meant cold weather or a cold climate. And if you've ever had the good luck to look at the Yoga for Sportsmen or Yoga for Sports, that I think was the last book Mr. Iyengar actually produced, he has a program for moving to a cold climate. He was thinking of sportsmen, cricketers in particular, going to another country where suddenly it's much colder than they're used to. And they're all poses where you roll yourself into a little ball and wrap yourself up round yourself. All those poses we find rather difficult, but which do keep you warm. They retain heat in the body.
Very different to the respiratory styles sequencing that you might find in holistic health as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talking about the photographs, which ones stand out for you?
I mean, one of the things, I don't know if this will show if I hold it up to you, but it's the clarity and it's the inspiration. I don't know if I can't see your screen, so I don't know. I wish. I've met two men who were fairly young when they saw a copy of Light on Yoga, and they were inspired to start practicing just from the book, but it was the photos that drew them in. And they both then went on to teach, to qualify as teachers. And I don't know so many women who've had that experience, but maybe there are some. If you look at Mr. Iyengar's face, they're not gymnastic poses. It's not just the physical skill. It's the look of repose in his face. That's something that Prashant often emphasizes, is that the face in all the asanas bar one, his face is just absolutely impassive, and you feel the attention is inwards, because quite honestly, some of those poses you could only do if you were really in your body, not sort of out there sort of thinking about how it presents, how it looks, what you're showing.
What's the bar one?
Simthasana pose, where you go into, either you cross your legs or you get into Padmasana, and then you come forward and you stick your tongue out and you roll your eyes up and you go, ha!
You're right, that's very outwards.
Very lion-like. Though from Mr. Iyengar, it should have been a tiger. I've never forgotten that issue of Yoga Rahasya where there were photos of the tiger that he'd contributed. I don't know if he bought it or contributed to the cost of keeping it in a zoo in India. The most wonderful Bengal tiger.
I've not heard that story.
I don't suppose the tiger is still alive. It was quite a long time ago. But I always felt he really resonated with tigers.
You were talking about the condensed Light on Yoga.
Oh, yes. The illustrated Light on Yoga.
And how many poses does that have compared to the full Light on Yoga?
A quarter. But the thing that hasn't been cut at all is the introduction. The introduction is printed absolutely in full, and it also has a scaled down version of the sequence for practice. So it has sequences for practice based on the 50 or so asanas that are presented, with the same instructions and same photos as the original. So they haven't been slimmed down, but it's just a selection of the more accessible asanas. Though I have to say, dare I criticize? No, I'm not criticizing, I'm just slightly puzzling why there are only the 5 basic standing asanas. There's Utthita Trikonasana, Utthita Parshvakonasana, Virabhadrasana 1, Virabhadrasana 2, Parshvottanasana, and then Padottanasana. No balancing standing poses, no Ardha Chandrasana, no Virabhadrasana 3. And that puzzled me, particularly not having Ardha Chandrasana, because as a woman, I have to, and as someone who mainly teaches women, Ardha Chandrasana is such a boon. So if they ever do another illustrated light on yoga, I'd really like to see Ardha Chandrasana in there as well.
Who was the audience compared to light on yoga? Was it something you could travel with, or what was the idea behind making it smaller and taking so many of the poses out?
Well, it says that it's a comprehensive yet straightforward introduction for the beginner by the acknowledged expert on the subject. Oh, here we are, 57 key asanas. He's not here to ask, sadly. But here we are, B.K.S. Iyengar 1993. I've got a signed copy. What struck me more than anything else was that the introduction, which I found so difficult when I started, and for a number of years afterwards, because it took a long time to absorb all the knowledge, the background knowledge, to understand what is the Bhagavad Gita, what is uh, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It takes a long time to absorb just all those foreign, what were then to me foreign concepts and names and descriptions. It was a tough read.
How has your understanding changed over the years?
Um, I can't really say deepened because it's still pretty superficial, really. But I'm now familiar with the terminology. I can say the words. I've memorized some of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, but it's still pretty superficial because I came to it fairly late in life as a linguist originally. That was my degree, was modern languages. Yeah, I've got a much better knowledge, but it's still superficial compared to the depth of knowledge of someone who's grown up in it and lived it and lived in the context.
Yeah. And how's light on yoga? How do you use it from a teaching perspective?
Well, because I've had quite a few structural problems recently, I've had one hip operation and I'm waiting for a second one. I can't demonstrate anymore. And most of my classes, I do have someone I can say, oh, everybody have a look at this. This is quite a nice half moon. Or, I use my better students to demonstrate on. But I take either the illustrated light on yoga or light on yoga to class to be my demonstration.
And actually, it's incredible, having been in Pune and having all those beautiful pictures around the studio there. It is amazing how inspiring it is, and you try and put it in your body, even if it doesn't look like Mr. Iyengar's full
Yeah, yeah,
expression of it. You
yeah,
try, don't you?
yeah. I mean, we do have a part of the visual cortex where there are cells that are actually designed. Their purpose is to imitate actions, movements, shapes that you see. And as a teacher, you must know that, you go down into a pose and then you see something you want to have better look. So you come up and half the class start coming up because their visual cortex is so quickly responsive much quicker than the ears.
And that's what I love about Iyengar Yoga is the different ways of teaching through the language, through the demonstration, so and then you can use the visual pictures as well. Thinking about what, because light on yoga's been around for 60 years, yet it's not really dated in terms of, like you were saying, there's not been another book to follow. What should younger practitioners take from it?
I think start with the first program in the programs. If they were working on their own, if they're going to an Iyengar class, then use it to go back. What I first did when I first started practicing was I just practiced what I remembered from the previous class, and I just do more or less what or some of what we'd been taught. And then used the book to remind me, and the hints and cautions. I didn't have a full-length mirror. That's one of the things that struck me in the hints for practice, that if you use a mirror, it must be full length and go all the way down to the floor. Whereas I actually used the reflection in a bow window. I didn't have a full-length mirror at all, so I just stood myself in front of my bow window, and particularly at night, you could get the reflections in the windows. But mostly you just need to go to class and listen to your teacher and practice what you've been taught and back it up with light on yoga, unless you're learning on your own. I'm not a big fan of modern technology. I have to use it, of course, but I don't follow anything on YouTube. And there's just too much to choose from. So I think having the book and subsequent books, the holistic health book, I think is brilliant for helping with one's own or one's students' medical issues. That I think does somewhat supersede the programs at the back of light on yoga. Some of the asanas suggested in the curative sequence are beyond most students, whereas holistic health makes it much more accessible.
If you kept one yoga book, which one would it be and why?
Oh, it would have to be light on yoga. Yeah, absolutely, without question. What else? If it had to be just one.
It was a planted question. And what does light on yoga mean to you now?
I was going to say old friend. That sounds a bit too familiar, but honestly, that is how I feel about it. That it's just been with me for so many years, and it's got. If it's, I'm just looking at it. It's got too many stickers in it. I've obviously taken it to class and wanted to have, those little tags you get with sticky bits and a little coloured strip that sticks out.
You'd have stickers on every page, wouldn't you?
No, not every page. I've long ago abandoned the deep back bends. They were never the poses that suited my spine and or my temperament. Come to that, I'm better with the more soothing forward bending asanas. It's been lovely having to sort of reflect on it, because I think often it's a bit like old friends or favourite dishes. You just take them for granted and you keep coming back to them, but you don't really think about it. Whereas being asked to think about it has really, actually, it's lifted my spirits. I thought, yes, great, wonderful. Aren't I lucky? Aren't we all so lucky?
No, and what I really like is the way that you said when you read the introduction and your understanding changed. I think that's what I take from the whole book is when I came to it as a beginner, when my teacher said, "Oh, you need a copy of Light on Yoga," and it was all like a foreign language apart from the pictures, which I thought I can never make any of those shapes. And then once you start your teacher training, you start to see a different side. And when I went to Pune, Raya really broke down some of the advanced poses with stuff like Hajvatanasana, being that gateway. And so it made me look at light on yoga in a very different way. And so it's a wonderful journey to have just one stable book that just is with you throughout your whole Iyengar yoga lifetime.
Mm. Do you know, it was Parshvottanasana that made me fall in love with Iyengar Yoga. I missed the first 3 classes of the course that I started on because there was a waiting list and 2 or 3 people dropped out because it was too tough for them. And I got a place in week 3 or week 4, and we did Parshvottanasana, and we did the whole thing with the hands in Paschima Namaskar, and I rubbed my fingers in my spine, and I looked up, and I went down, and then we did the old-fashioned version where you swing round with your head and shoulders down and come up the other side. And that just opened something in me, and that was like a key that fitted in a lock, and the lock turned and the door opened.
That's wonderful. What a lovely way to finish. Thank you so much for today.